Introducing Ed Wallace.
So I'd like to take a step back and tell you a story about the greatest developer of business relationships I ever knew.
Sharing stories about the taxi driver that changed his life.
The other thing I noticed was how clean the cab was. Now, who all has ridden in a New York City cab here? How does it feel when you get out of that cab? Right? Need a shower, exactly. And please don't touch those pockets, okay? There's bad stuff in those pockets. This was nothing like that. This was just perfect.
Ed Wallace inspires, entertains, and enlightens audiences across the country.
I said, I need to know the secret to success. What is it? What are you doing that's making you so busy?
With a warm, disarming charm, Ed reveals the secrets to building relational capital.
And he looks in the rearview mirror and he takes his thumb and his index finger and he holds them this far apart. And he says, well, you know, Ed, and he had this Midwestern way about him, it's the little extras that turn fares into friends.
Author of the critically acclaimed book, Business Relationships That Last, Ed Wallace is a recognized authority on customer loyalty.
Relational capital is the distinctive value created by people in a business relationship. Or if you want to call it the little extras, that's fine too.
Leading companies in every industry rely on his insights and principles to drive growth and profitability.
If the secret to our success is our relationships, then we need a plan for our relationships. But if I were to ask you, are you spending enough time on your relationships? What would you say?
Ed Wallace can help you and your team get started.
My friends, the margin of error in your business is too thin today.
His simple 5-step process and action plans help teams recapture the lost art of relationship building.
At the bottom of the ladder, they don't want your help. They're still trying to figure out if they like you. Forget about all the rationale. They're trying to figure out, do I like this person? Do I want to create visibility to this person in our organization? Can I trust them? Are they smart enough to help us? Are they credible?
Give your team the tools they need to drive performance.
The relational GPS is the roadmap to our success in our business relationships. So the more credible you are, the more people trust you, the more they can sense that you're yourself, the more goals, passions, and struggles they share. The more goals, passions, and struggles they share, the faster you move up the ladder. The principle of worthy intent is the golden rule of business, and that's putting your stakeholders' best interest ahead of yours, putting their goals ahead of yours, being in service to theirs.
See for yourself why companies and audiences of all sizes are enthralled by Ed Wallace's unique approach.
In our lives, it's hard for us to do grandiose things, especially at work when we have so many relationships we're dealing with. But guess what? People will notice when you do those little things. It's been a privilege being with you today. And I hope that in some small way you can take Max with you on your own journey to business relationships that last. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Hi, I'm Ed Wallace, founder and principal of the Relational Capital Group. Before you begin your workshop, I'd like to share our learning philosophy with you. We have no stone tablets. By that I mean, we understand that you already know many of these concepts. However, they say that adult learning is helping adults see what they already know through a different lens in ways they'll never forget. Therefore, my hope is that you will take the relational capital methodology and make it immediately actionable in your selling efforts. Enjoy your learning. I'd like to take a few minutes to share with you now some research on business relationships, and then I'll tell you what's in it for you. If I were to ask you to complete this statement, people buy from people they, my experience indicates you would say like, trust, know, respect, were referred by, even share a common goal with. It's a pretty easy statement to finish because those are what I call relational attributes. They're attributes that we ascribe to people that we'd like to buy from, and ultimately we hope that those same attributes get ascribed to us. See, we all know what really goes into a great business relationship. But sometimes it's great to have our beliefs validated by like market research or data. There was a recent national study of senior executives of Fortune 500 companies, and they were asked, what's the key to success for you every year? 89% of these executives responded, relationships. I guess they better. Relationships are all over their homepage on their websites. Yet when they asked these same executives, what do you do about that? Only 24% could respond that they do anything intentionally around relationship advancement. And when the 24% were asked, what is it exactly that you do? Their response was, we have a CRM system. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never seen an R in a CRM system. You put the R into CRM. Why do you think that is? Why is there this paradox where 89% of executives say relationships are the key to their success for themselves and their teams, and only 24% can respond that they do anything strategically or intentionally about that? And those 24% throw technology at a human challenge. Why do you think that is? Probably because relationships take time. They cost money. They're difficult. How do I do it? Now, here's what's in it for you. Our workshop is about a methodology, a routine, a process to help you launch, advance, and sustain all of your business relationships. And my hope is, after you complete our workshop, you'll be able to look at your key relationships more strategically and more intentionally, and you'll be able to optimize those relationships, which will lead to increased sales and success in your careers. I'd like to share with you a story about the greatest developer of business relationships I ever knew, and the very common place where I met this remarkable person. I'll take you back to 1990. I had just taken a job in sales. Now I'm a CPA by education, and I've been in recovery for the last 22 years. And my sales territory was in the Midwest. I lived on the East Coast, so that meant every week I had to get in a taxi cab, get to the airport, spend a few days in Chicago or St. Louis or Minneapolis, and come back on a Thursday. At that same time, we had just had our first son, Brett, and he and my wife, Laurie, had just started sleeping through the night. And we all know that that's a process we don't want to interrupt. So I would try to leave the house around 5 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. And I was always concerned about the cab driver ringing the bell and waking up the baby. So one Tuesday morning, I'm packing my computer, I'm still packing my suitcase, I'm behind schedule, I get distracted, the driver appears at the door, and he rings the doorbell. I sprint to the door, I ask him to not ring again, and he grabs my bag and starts wheeling it towards his taxi cab. I pause for a moment, I look up at the ceiling. Brett's still sleeping, my wife Laurie's still sleeping. I'm off to a great start. Now as I approach the cab, it's unlike any other cab I had been taking. Now as I said, I'm living on the East Coast, and the cab this fellow was driving was a British style cab just like this one. Pretty cool. And as I approach the taxi, he's holding the door open for me. That never happened before. As I get in, he closes the door behind me without saying anything. As he's coming around, I notice several things about the cab. First thing I notice is the nice, soft, saddle tan colored leather. And he had the bench seats pushed back. In the British cabs, there's bench seats that you sit forward on. Plenty of leg room. The other thing I noticed was how clean the cab was. Anybody ever ride a New York City cab? You know how that feels. And you really don't want to touch those door pockets. This was just perfectly clean. The other thing I noticed was how quiet the cab was. Now, at 5 a.m., I was accustomed to hearing the sports talk station or the traffic report or that annoying dispatcher's voice. This was just totally calm and quiet. And to top it all off, in the seat next to me, he had a little plastic bottle of water. This guy thought of everything. Driver comes around, he gets in, he immediately turns and extends his hand across the front seat and says, "Good morning, Ed. My name is Max. How are you today?" As I'm reaching for his hand, I'm wondering, how did he get my name? And we start on our way. On about a 30-minute ride to the airport, Max learns an awful lot about me. He learns about my goals and aspirations in sales. He learns about how I'm struggling in sales and thinking about going back into accounting. He learns about our infant son, Brett, how important it is for he and my wife not to be disturbed when the driver comes in the morning. And what Max was really good at was asking the next question. So here's an example of our first conversation. "So Ed, what do you do?" "I'm in sales, Max." "What do you sell?" "Software." "Where do you do that?" "In the Midwest." Three common questions that any cab driver could ask at any time. And then typically the conversation, deviates from there. Here's his fourth question. Now remember, he's driving the cab while we're doing this. "Well, Ed, tell me, do you sell on a territory or an account basis?" What do you think is going through my mind? I said, "I sell on a territory basis, Max." He says, "Well, tell me about your quota." "My quota?" "Yes, your quota." I'm thinking, how does a cab driver know about things like quotas? I said, "Well, I do have one." He goes, "Well, tell me about the mix in your quota." I go, what do you mean by the mix?" He said, "Well, what percentage of your business comes from new customers and what percentage comes from existing customers?" And I said, "Well, Max, it's about 75-25. Our company wants me to sell more new business." He said, "Yeah, but I bet you those existing customers are more profitable." "Yes, they are, Max." And on and on and on. And I'm sharing more and more and more with this guy who seems to know an awful lot about sales. We get to the airport. I give Max an incredible tip. "Max, that was great. I'm doing a touchdown dance on the curb. See you next Tuesday at 5 a.m. And Max typically had a grin on his face, and at that point, his grin turned to a frown. And he said, "I'm really sorry, Ed, I can't take you next week." And I said, "Why, Max? Did I offend you? Is it something I said?" He said, "Oh, no, nothing like that, Ed." He said, "I have a lot of fares, I have a lot of friends, and they typically need to book 3 to 4 weeks in advance with me." I look at Max, I'm incredulous. For a 5 a.m. ride on a Tuesday in the summertime, you can't take me next Tuesday? "I have a lot of friends, Ed." I said, "Okay, Max, when are you available?" And he had these long, thin fingers, and he had this spiral calendar. And he starts paging through it on the curb of the airport. And the pages are all dog-eared and written on, coffee spilled on there. And he points his finger on a date. He picks the Thursday before Labor Day to pick me up again. Now remember, my routine was Tuesday, come back on a Thursday. Max is suggesting that I go to Chicago and fly into O'Hare on the Thursday before Labor Day and come back on the Friday of Labor Day weekend. What do you think I said? "I'll take it." Max writes it down. He goes his way, I go my way. Fast forward 3 weeks. It's a Thursday, so I know Max will be my driver today. But as usual, I'm behind schedule. I'm still packing my briefcase. My wife and our baby are still asleep. I'm concerned about Max ringing the bell. And he peers at the door, and what do you think he did not do this time? That's right. He didn't ring the bell. He just gently tapped on the screen door. For years in sales, we've been trained to listen and remember. Max added a third dimension for me that day. He listened, he remembered, and he cared about the answers. So this time I figured I'm going to ask him a few questions. I said, "Max, tell me about your writers. Tell me about these friends of yours that keep you so busy." And he had this humble way about him, so I had to ask him a second time. And he said, "Well, Ed, a lot of the local CEOs ride with me. And when their colleagues come into town, they have me pick them up too." I said, "Who else?" He goes, "Salespeople like yourself." He said, "In families when they go to the airport for vacation." And I've gotten so busy, Ed, that I started a tour business on the weekends to take elderly people from the suburbs into the city for a tour of the art museum or the historic district. At that point, I jumped in. Before he even finished his statement, I said, Max, you're in sales. In fact, you're in a commoditized, regulated business. And it doesn't ever feel like you have to worry about your pipeline. It doesn't feel like you have to worry about your forecast. You don't seem very rushed, and you seem pretty happy. What is the secret to success? And he paused, and he held his thumb and his index finger about an inch apart. And as he squinted into the rearview mirror, he said, Ed, I think it's the little extras that turn fares into friends. Now my mind is exploding, the little extras. And I thought back to when I played sports, or you hear coaches or teachers talking about how we're working on the fundamentals today, getting back to blocking and tackling. So I said, Max, I need to know what the little extras are. Is it the beautiful taxi cab? Is it the on-time arrivals and drop-offs? Is it the pleasant conversation? Is it the knowledge of sales? Is it the gentle tapping on the screen door in the morning? And I listed 4 or 5 other things as well, and Max answered me, yes. What do you think he meant by that? That's right. It's all of those things. Yet Max was really great at aligning with the one most important thing for each of his friends. And after one ride and only 30 minutes with me, he realized it was, don't wake up the baby, and get this guy off to a good start. And I call this aligning with our customer, our prospect, our colleagues' relational GPS. That's their business and personal goals, their causes or their passions, things they care really deeply about, and their struggles. And what human being doesn't have those? Max so inspired me, and this is one of the concepts he inspired, that I actually feature him in my latest book, Business Relationships That Last. So as I was writing Business Relationships That Last, I reflected on Max's foundational principle, or his guiding philosophy. And I came up with 2 words, worthy intent. And worthy intent is keeping the other person's best interests at the core, or the forefront of your business relationship. And then I thought about, okay, well, how does worthy intent manifest in a business relationship? And I reflected on 3 qualities. I call these the essential qualities of relational capital. By the way, we all have these qualities, so there's no value judgment here. The thing about Max was he helped me reappreciate how important these qualities are. And the first quality is credibility. And the definition of credibility is the power to elicit belief. Now, if you think about it, have you ever put the word power with credibility? I always thought of credibility as a check the box. They have an education or they work for a certain brand. But credibility is what I call the gatekeeper of the 3 qualities. Because think about it, until you're believable, until you're deemed competent, why would your prospect or your customer share their goals, passions, and struggles with you? Things they're trying to accomplish, struggles they're having in their work, or things they care deeply about? Why would they do that? Max developed credibility by asking great questions, credible questions, that helped me understand he knew something about something I was interested in, that was sales. Once you're credible, once you're deemed believable, then your prospect or customer gives you an opportunity to display integrity and trust, which is the second quality. This is where you get a chance to keep your promises, to keep your commitments. Oh, and by the way, this is where the relationship transitions from a one-way relationship, when you're trying to develop your credibility, to a 2-way mutual relationship. Because guess what? If you're making commitments and delivering for them, your customer is doing the same for you. And then the third quality is authenticity. Authenticity is being genuine, being yourself. I call it the bravest quality, because the sooner we can get to authenticity and have authentic relationships, they'll rise to new heights. When these three qualities come together, credibility, integrity, and authenticity, they form relational capital, which is the distinctive value created by people in a business relationship. In every business relationship you have a measure of credibility, a measure of integrity, and a measure of authenticity. When these three qualities come together, they form relational capital. That's the distinctive value created by people in a business relationship. Now think about your best business relationships. Are you believable? Do you deliver on each other's commitments? And are you comfortable being yourselves with each other? My guess is you said yes to all three of those. Congratulations. You're fully on your way to building business relationships that last. If you can take one thing from this workshop today, I would ask that you consider the concept of relational GPS. Now think about how GPS, global positioning systems, work in our cars. Satellites triangulate, they use latitude and longitude, and they ultimately get into our dashboards and navigate us through. They're the roadmap to our travel success. Well, a relational GPS is the roadmap to relational success. Think about it. The more credible you are, the more believable, the more you deliver on your commitments, and the more comfortable you are being yourself, the better the chances of your customers sharing their business and personal goals, causes or passions, things they care deeply about, and struggles. And we all have those. And if I were to rank these three, I'd say that the goals are the easiest thing for a customer to share with us. They've kind of been conditioned to do that. But when they start sharing struggles with you, your believability and integrity have gone way up with them. When they start giving you visibility to their teams and letting you walk around their plant and meeting other people, they're confident in their relationship with you. And then ultimately, when they share things they care deeply about, some cause, some charity, their children, that's when you're building a business relationship that lasts. So my challenge to you is, go back to your most important business relationships and see if you can identify their goals, passions, and struggles. So our clients comment all the time, the relational capital concepts are great, but how do I apply these? How do I do it, Ed? And you know, there's an old saying, without process, we don't do things on purpose. Without a routine, we can't necessarily repeat success. So to help implement the concepts, we created the relational ladder. We use the ladder because a ladder represents a common model that we all know and understand. And in a learning process, you can go step by step. You can advance. What else happens on a ladder? You can slide down or fall off a ladder. Can you slide off or fall down in a business relationship? You sure can. And if you think about a ladder, there's rungs, and those are the 5 steps: establishing common ground, displaying integrity and trust, using time purposefully, offering help, and asking for help. And there's also a frame on the ladder. Those are your hard skills and your soft skills. Hard skills may be your education or the way you understand your product and services. Soft skills could be the way you communicate and write. Sometimes we tend to lean on one skill or the other because that's where we're better. I tend to lean on the soft side of the ladder. Others tend to lean on the hard side. And they say sometimes an overutilized strength can become a weakness. A great relationship, the process, the routine, the rungs of the ladder will keep you in balance. Now, the first step on the ladder is establishing common ground. And you'll notice the ladder is the widest at the bottom. because at this point, you're an acquaintance in the business relationship. And it's really pretty much on you as a seller to launch that relationship. How did Max establish common ground with me? He asked great questions. His questions were so compelling that I got a lot of answers from the questions, not from him presenting any of his solutions to me. And we want to move out of the acquaintance dimension as soon as we can. Once we move out of that dimension, you'll notice the ladder begins to taper. And the next rung is displaying integrity and trust. The relationship has transitioned at this point from an acquaintance to a professional peer. And the word peer really relates to a mutual or a two-way relationship. This is really where you want to start advancing your relational capital. This is where you need to keep your commitments. And by the way, your peer relationship, they also need to keep theirs. They say that integrity is never neutral, and that means every time we're together with a customer, a prospect, a colleague, research indicates that integrity either goes up or down after we leave that interaction. Think about how powerful that concept is. Even if it isn't true across the board, if you go into every interaction believing that, we might behave a little differently. The next rung, as you're going through the professional peer dimension, is using time purposefully. Everyone's most valuable asset today is their time, and none of us have enough of it. It feels like we spend about 60% of our time in meetings, 30% doing email, and maybe about 10% actually getting stuff done. We chose to focus on the meetings aspect of our time. Now you've had a successful initial meeting, you've launched the relationship, you've done a few things together, you're keeping each other's commitments and promises, integrity is growing in the relationship, you're moving up the ladder. Now you're firmly in the professional peer dimension, which, by the way, is a great place to be. Professional peers meet quite often, their teams meet quite often, and the data indicates there's about 12 million business meetings a day in the United States and that we participate in. And of those 12 million meetings, they say that because of poorly planned, designed, and executed meetings, we all tend to lose 4 to 5 business days of productivity a month. Now, as a seller, think about that. If you could save a few days of those 4 to 5 lost days because of better planned and executed meetings, not only will it help you achieve better sales success, it'll certainly help your customer accomplish their objectives as well. Professional peers look at the time spent together as an investment and not a cost. And the best way to do that is to have a purpose, plan outcomes, and have a defined process for every meeting that you conduct. We're moving into rare air now. We're on the 4th rung of the ladder. That's offering help. Now you're probably wondering, why is offering help so far up in the ladder? Shouldn't I be offering help on the 1st rung of the ladder? Here's the thing. They don't really want your help yet. They're still trying to figure out they like, know, and trust you. If they're willing to give you visibility into their company or walk the plant or all the different next steps you need to do. Why in the world would they want your help yet? But now you've invested in the relationship, your professional peers. In fact, you're moving into a dimension called respected advisor. And now when you offer unsolicited help, guess what? They pay attention. They're looking for unsolicited offers of help. And by the way, they're offering you help as well. Let me speak for a minute about respected advisors before we finish the ladder. Respected advisor relationships are the highest dimension of the ladder. Respected advisors ask each other questions like, what do you think about? Can you help us with? Would you refer someone? And those questions have nothing to do with the original reason you came together. Now think about how powerful that is when someone's asking your opinion about a new hire and it has nothing to do with the goods and services you provide to them. The other thing about respected advisor relationships is they can ask each other for help, and they generally get it. Now, if you were to look along the right side of the ladder, you'll notice that there's acquaintance, professional peer, and respected advisor dimensions. You should be able to plot every business relationship you have in the relational ladder. We would suggest that you keep about 15% of your relationships in that acquaintance dimension. And you want to move them up the ladder or you want to move them off your ladder. The real sweet spot of the ladder, and it's a bit counterintuitive, is the professional peer dimension. If you could get 75 to 80% of your relationships in this dimension, you should be having outstanding selling success. And ultimately, only a few of your relationships can get to the top, can become respected advisors, because it's really hard work. And quite frankly, none of us have the time. So if you can get 5 to 10% of your relationships in the respected advisor dimension, you're doing incredibly well. Now you'll notice an arrow on the right side of the ladder. Relational capital gains are dynamic increases of credibility, integrity, and authenticity. They take you from transactional to long-term outstanding business relationships. Oh, and by the way, this is where the resulting referrals will change your career. So there you have it. The relational ladder, a process, 5 steps to transform contacts into high-performing relationships on your journey to business relationships that last. The real challenge then is not in applying the relational capital concepts or in using the Dow selling process, but in bringing the two together. Now, if we look at the Dow selling process, we'll notice that profitable customer relationships form the core of that selling process. And we can't have profitable customer relationships without strategies and processes. So applying the relational ladder, relational GPS, worthy intentions, and action planning at each step of the Dow selling process will help you distinguish yourself in your selling efforts and lead you to profitable customer relationships that last. So would you like to hear where Max is today? 4 years into our friendship, Max took Laurie, Brett, and I to the airport for vacation. And there was going to be about a month from when he dropped us off until he picked me up again. So that day arrived, and I was waiting for the gentle tap on the screen door. And I looked out into our driveway, and I noticed there was a Suburban cab there that day. I guess it was Max's day off. As I'm approaching the cab, I noticed it's got a hubcap missing. The trunk is popped open. No one's holding the door open for me. The windows are closed. The music inside is so loud, it almost looks like the cab is vibrating. And the driver looks like he hadn't slept in a few days. Need I say more? Open up the trunk. I immediately am greeted with a very greasy tire iron and spare tire, crumpled up newspapers. I make some room, place my suitcase in. As I try to close the trunk, it doesn't click. It actually took 3 tries to get the trunk to click closed. Open the door up. No soft saddle tan leather like in Max's cab. Blue vinyl, hot blue vinyl. Did you ever notice when there's tears in the blue vinyl in cabs, the drivers try to match the duct tape color to the color of the vinyl, and it's usually a powder blue versus a dark blue? A lot of duct tape in this cab. Crumpled up candy wrappers on the floor, sticky door handles. Music's blaring. Over the din of the music, the driver yells, "So what are we doing?" I said, "I'm headed to the airport. Where's Max?" Driver paused, turned the radio down, kind of turned, and he said, "I guess you hadn't heard. He passed away." And I always have to collect myself when I tell this part of the story, because what I didn't tell you earlier, which makes this story even more a miracle, is that my father had passed away about 6 months before Max miraculously appeared at my screen door. And the other thing that went through my mind at that point was I took this incredible friendship for granted. And don't we sometimes take our best relationships, business and personal, for granted? So I had to find out what happened. Because let's face it, my only friendship was in the cab. It wasn't outside of there. So I asked the driver, can you tell me about his services? And he lit up. He said, oh, they were really busy. I said, well, what do you mean by busy? Who was there? Well, there was a lot of people there in suits. I guess those were the CEOs. He said, people that look like you. So I guess I still look like a sales rep. A bunch of kids running around. I guess those were the families he took to the airport for vacation. And he said, a lot of old people. I guess those were the senior citizens with his tour business. And this hard-edged guy with the music blaring got real reflective again. And he said, you know, we really miss Max around the taxi yard. But I ask you, do you really think Max is gone? I wonder if the CEOs who were lining up to get in this cab to have this experience with this incredible guy took some of that wisdom back into their companies and somehow made folks' lives better. I bet you they did. I can't speak for the other salespeople, but the second year I rode with Max, I won Salesman of the Year. Heck, I have a company, I've written books because of my rides with this incredible guy. I wonder about the kids who are now young adults, if they ever reflect on their family vacations, if they're a little more joyful because of their travels with Uncle Max. And finally, at a time in their lives when our senior citizens are the most lonely and vulnerable, here came Max every Saturday and Sunday to just make their day. So he's really not gone. In fact, if we think about Max in terms of real business performance, did he have incredible customer loyalty? He sure did. Do we want that? Absolutely. He actually made more per transaction, as I mentioned earlier, in a regulated, commoditized business because he had more tips. He got a lot of referrals. I never saw an ad with Max the cab driver on it. Yet his pipeline was full, his forecast was predictable. My favorite, though, is Max was competitor-proof. Max created an experience and environment that all different types of individuals couldn't get enough of. And after all these years and several books and going through speeches and workshops and meeting with people all over the world, I've realized there really is one secret to success. And that's thinking about the relationship first in all of our interactions. Hopefully, you've had a great learning experience. Now I need a commitment from each of you to take the relational capital concepts and practices and apply them to your everyday selling activities so that you can achieve even greater sales success on the road to business relationships that last.